Hey everyone. So today I want you to think about, for just a moment, the best leader that you've ever known or worked for. They weren't born knowing how to be a good leader or a good boss. Nobody really is, right? But they had to build that skill over time. And here's the thing about leadership skills. Some of them you can learn from a book or maybe a class, like, I don't know, how to run a good meeting or give good feedback with a certain framework, or even something simple like managing a budget. Those are sometimes procedural, which means somebody hands you the method, you apply it, and you get better by using that framework. But some skills don't really work that way. You can know the theory perfectly and still fail the moment it actually matters because those particular skills are somewhat unnatural, especially in the moment when things are a little bit more intense than they usually are. Which means the only way to build them is through deliberate practice and being aware enough to know when those opportunities to practice are present. In this episode, I'm going to give you 4 leadership skills that you can't just learn from a book, ones that you have to build through deliberate practice. Welcome to the Honest Leadership series, where we talk about how to become better, more honest leaders in a world that is filled with the opposite. My promise to you is to give you simple actions that you can take, not just some theory to admire. So if that sounds good to you, please go ahead and subscribe. And if this episode helps you in any way, I would greatly appreciate if you left a like before you go. Now, here's the irony. You clicked on a video that's about to teach you skills that I just said can't be taught. So let's be honest about what is actually happening here. I can't just hand you the skill. What I can do is show you exactly what to practice and how, so you're not just waiting around hoping that experience teaches you eventually. All right, so here is skill number 1, owning it before your team has to. Now let's actually define this and what that means though, because it's bigger than just apologizing when you screw up. It's taking responsibility for a decision that didn't work out, even if it made total sense at the time. It's saying, I don't know, instead of bluffing your way through a question. It's standing behind your team's results in front of others, even when you know one specific person or process is the reason things went wrong. And it's always being willing to say you changed your mind instead of quietly acting like you always thought that way. So let's talk about why this matters so much. Trust is really just predictability plus honesty. When your team watches you volunteer the bad news yourself, instead of being forced to take responsibility, they learn your word is good, even when it's not flattering to you. It also protects your authority. And I know that sounds a little bit backwards, but authority isn't about never being wrong. It's about holding yourself accountable for what you do, what you say, and the decisions that you make. And that is what sets the tone for your entire team. People mirror what they see demonstrated from the leader. When they watch you own something hard, that becomes the standard that they hold themselves to as well. Not because you told them to, but because you set the example. Picture 2 bosses where something on the team just went horribly wrong. It doesn't matter what. The first one handles it by blaming the team, maybe an individual, the circumstances, or maybe some process, but never themselves. Resentment starts building because their team watches them dodge responsibility that was actually theirs to own. But the second one, the second boss that is, says, you know what, that's on me. Not because they personally made the mistake, but because they understand that building the right process, managing risks and overcoming obstacles, and managing the team's results was their job to begin with. It's the same failure in both scenarios, but 2 entirely different cultures. Now, to be clear, this isn't about letting people off the hook. If someone on your team actually did drop the ball, that conversation still happens, but just in private, between you and them. Owning it publicly and holding someone on your team accountable privately, those aren't opposites. They're just 2 sides to the same job. Okay, so let's take another example. Say you made a decision as a leader, and it turns out that it just didn't pan out the way you thought. The first boss says, well, I didn't have all the information, so it made complete sense at the time. that's really just an explanation for why it was okay to make the wrong decision, not ownership of how it really turned out. But the second one says, I made that call and it didn't work. And here's what I'm going to do differently the next time. One is explaining, the other is owning it. So how do you actually practice all this? Well, first, start by learning to hear the difference between an explanation and true ownership. Listen for the language that distances you from the outcome and replace it with language that puts you in the middle of it. Here's some really simple examples. The issue was, or what happened was, becomes I should have. Or it fell through the cracks becomes I dropped it. Or we didn't communicate well becomes I didn't make it clear. Or the last one is, the timeline was really tight on this one becomes I didn't plan for enough time. Do you see the difference there? Notice the phrases you automatically reach for when something goes wrong and force yourself to swap it for some version of I should have. If you keep practicing that, you will rewire that habit over time. Here is one bolder way to practice this that I've actually done myself, but I'm going to be honest with you, it isn't going to work for every team in every scenario. So you have to be honest with yourself before you try this one on whether you actually have the kind of relationship with your team members that would let you pull this off. You'll see what I mean once I go over it. On one of my teams, we started making a bunch of really small errors, and the quality of our work really started slipping. So I asked the team to do a self-assessment, meaning each person would go back through their own recent mistakes, bad assumptions, poor decisions, bad information they worked off of, whatever it was. And then we'd come together as a team and talk about what we could improve going forward. This wasn't about blame. It was about finding our weaknesses as a team and improving from there. But when I gave them that assignment, I went first. I told them straight up that I would never ask them to do this without doing it myself first. So as part of the kickoff, I started with my own self-assessment as an example. I walked through all the operational things that I had gotten wrong, moments the team messed up, but honestly, I should have been more clear up front, or things I should have double checked before it left my desk. It was my piece of it, out loud, before I ever asked them to do the same. So try something like this if you think it will work for your team. Owning it before your team has to isn't about looking perfect. It's about being honest that you're never going to be, neither is your team, and the only way we get better is by understanding our mistakes and improving from there. Now, let's talk about skill 2, letting go of control. Letting go of control doesn't mean lowering your standards or stepping back and hoping it works out. It means trusting someone else's process, even when it's not how you do it yourself. It means clearly stating what a good outcome looks like and then letting them, your team, decide how to get there. And it means resisting the urge to redo their work the second it doesn't match exactly how you would have done it. Here's why this one's so hard to practice. It's faster to just do it yourself. But every time you do that, you're teaching your team something you probably don't want to teach them, that their way is never going to be good enough, and that you're going to just override it. So they stop even trying. They hand you something halfway done, because why put in any real effort if you're just going to redo it and override it anyways? And here's the honest caveat. Sometimes you do have to step in. If they've gone completely off the rails, you can't just let it crash, right? But before you take it back, ask yourself if they went off the rails because you weren't clear enough about what you needed in the first place. That might be on you, not them. So in those cases, step in, get them back on track, and then let go of control again. Because if you never let them struggle through it and learn on their own, they will never actually grow. Picture this. You're a leader who controls absolutely everything. Every task, every decision, every detail runs through you first. In the beginning, it feels like it's working. Things get done exactly how you wanted them to. No mistakes, no surprises, and no version of work that isn't exactly what you wanted. Now, fast forward like 6 months or maybe even a year in the future. That same habit that felt like strength in the beginning has quietly built you a team that can't function at all without you. They stop making any decisions because they know you'll just change it anyways. They stop solving problems because they know you'll just swoop in and fix it anyways. And they only hand you half-finished projects because they know you're just going to change the final version anyways to how you wanted it to look. And now you are buried. You're doing almost all of the work on behalf of the entire team, and you have to be exhausted at this point. What's more is you probably resent them now for not stepping up, but they also resent you for never letting them. So how do you make sure that this doesn't happen to you? Well, first, when you give direction or you delegate a task, give the desired outcome, not the steps. Before you assign it, get clear in your own head on exactly one thing. What does good look like? Not how you'd get there, just what done well actually means to you. Say that part out loud to them really clearly, and then stop yourself before you start explaining the steps to get there. That part's not your job anymore. It's theirs. This is harder than it sounds because your instinct is going to be to keep talking, to keep filling in the how. But notice that instinct and let it go unsaid. Spend that energy continuing to paint the picture of the expected result instead of the recommended path. Now, the second way that you can practice this is letting something stay imperfect on purpose. But be smart about this one and about what you pick. Choose something really low stakes and easily reversible. Something where a wrong turn costs you just a little bit of time, not really a client, not a deadline, and not any real credibility. And then let them own the outcome, good or bad, without you hovering over it. If it turns out great, tell them that. Point out specifically what worked and be honest that you may have learned something too, that their way got the job done, maybe even better than yours would have. If it comes back and it didn't go well, don't take it back and try to fix it yourself. Ask them if they'd like some coaching on how to make it better next time. That question does two things at once. One, it respects that it was their attempt, and it keeps the door open for you to actually develop them. And then the last way that you could practice this skill is to catch yourself mid-rewrite. Here's what I mean. This one's about noticing your own habits in real time. The next time you're editing someone's work and you feel that urge to change it to your version, stop for a second and ask yourself one really honest question. Is this actually wrong, or is it just different from how I would have done it? If it's wrong, then of course you have to fix it. That's still your job. But if it's just different, leave it. Every time you leave it, you're proving to yourself that different doesn't mean wrong, and you're building that muscle that you actually need to do this in the future. Letting go of control doesn't mean letting go of your standards. It just means trusting your team enough to meet them their own way. So that's number 2. The next one, though, is something you're probably already doing, just not as deeply as you'd think. This is skill 3, listening more than you talk. Now, listening more than you talk doesn't necessarily mean staying quiet and nodding along until it's your turn to talk again. It means asking enough questions that you actually understand the emotion behind what someone's saying, not just the facts of it. And it might actually mean talking more than you'd probably think, because real listening, active listening, might include repeating back what you heard in your own words so that the other person can confirm you actually got it. Not just the words, but what they really meant behind it. Here's why this one matters so much. And it's not about being polite. First, listening to your team is your best diagnostic tool. Most of the time, the problem someone brings you isn't the real problem. It's a symptom of it. If you jump straight to solving what they said, you fix the surface issue and the real one is just going to surface somewhere else in a month or two. Second, it's an early warning system. People almost never walk in and announce some big problem or struggle they have. They will test the waters first to see if it's okay to trust you. If you're actually listening, you'll catch that early, while it's still cheap and easy to fix. And then third, it's rare. So it stands out more than almost anything else you can do as a leader. Most people listen to respond, not really to understand. They're halfway to their own answer before the other person's even finished talking. And if you're one of the few who actually listens to understand first, people are going to notice, and they'll bring you their real problems so that you have a chance to deal with them. So picture this. You're the leader who doesn't really listen. Not because you don't care. It's actually the opposite. It's that you're so eager to help that the second someone starts talking, you're already jumping in with a solution. You solve the problem you just heard or thought you heard, and then you spend the rest of the conversation explaining your fix, feeling good about how helpful you just were. But here's the problem. Maybe what you just fixed isn't what really needed to be fixed, and now your employee is stuck. They can't exactly stop you mid-monologue and say, actually, none of that is what I was trying to say. So they just nod, they say thank you, and they leave. And they are never going to bring you a problem like that again, because now they know you don't actually listen to understand. So how do you actually practice this? Well, first, practice asking better questions. Asking something that opens the door, like, what's the part of this that's bothering you the most? Or is there more to this than what you've just told me? Questions like that tell someone you're not done listening yet and that you're still open to hearing more. Practice repeating it back. After someone tells you something very real, try saying it back in your own words. So what I'm hearing is, or it sounds like the real issue is. Make it clear that that's all you're doing. You're not solving anything yet, and you're certainly not trying to put your own spin on it. You're just checking that you actually understood. Then stop and let them tell you straight up if any part of that wasn't right. This feels slow and maybe a little awkward at first, but it's refreshingly intentional. The third thing that you can practice is prying, but do it respectfully. When you sense there's more underneath, don't just let it go because it feels a little uncomfortable to push. Ask gentle follow-up questions. Something like, you said that kind of quickly. Is there more going on there? And then actually wait for the answer instead of filling the silence yourself. You can also try sharing your own observations instead of asking direct questions. Something like, I noticed you've seemed a little off since that meeting. Is this connected to this? And see if that opens the door. Sometimes offering what you've noticed gets someone further than asking them to explain themselves outright, because you're doing some of the work for them instead of putting it all on them to find the words. And here's the payoff. Once you actually start practicing this, you're going to notice something. Almost every real conversation has an iceberg effect. What someone says out loud is a small piece sitting on top of something much bigger underneath it. Once you see that iceberg for the first time, you won't be able to unsee it. You'll start hearing the small sentence and the bigger thing underneath it at the same time and every time. Listening more than you talk isn't about staying quiet. It's about hearing what someone actually needs, not just what they said. So now this brings us to our last one, and it might be the hardest to actually practice. Skill 4 is clarity so good that it's almost blunt. Clarity so good that it's almost blunt doesn't mean being harsh or skipping the kindness. It means saying the actual thing in plain language instead of softening it until the point completely disappears. It means giving feedback, direction, or making a decision without wrapping it in so many qualifiers that the other person walks away unsure of what you actually meant. And it means being willing to say the uncomfortable versions of the truth clearly, instead of the comfortable version, which leaves room for lots of misunderstanding. Here's why this one matters. When you're not clear, you're not actually being kind. You just feel like you are in the moment. Softening a message until it's vague doesn't protect the other person. It just moves the hard part onto them. Now they've got to guess what you actually meant. And it also costs you time you don't get back. Vague direction gets vague results. And then you're back in the same conversation a week from now. They're frustrated and you're frustrated and everyone is confused about why. Clarity the first time actually is the kind thing because it saves them from having to guess wrong and then redo the work later. And it saves you from having to have the same conversation twice. And lastly, it builds trust in a way that being nice never will. People don't actually trust the leader who's always the easiest to talk to. They trust the one whose word they can count on, the one who says what they actually mean so that they never have to wonder what's really going on. Think about a leader that you've had to work for that never gave you clear feedback. Every review was super vague, like, keep up the good work, or it just needs a little bit more polish. And you walked away with no idea what they actually thought or what you should do next. How did that make you feel? Think about a leader who never gave you clear direction. Every assignment came with just enough detail to get you started and not enough to know what good actually looked like. How did that make you feel? Now, think about a leader who did the opposite. Someone who told you exactly where you stood, even when it wasn't what you actually wanted to hear. Someone who gave you clear direction and enough that you actually knew what good looked like before you even started. That probably didn't always feel great in the moment, but you knew where you stood and you trusted them because you never had to guess. So how do we actually practice this one? Well, first, practice cutting the qualifiers. Before you give any feedback or direction, say it in your own head one time without any softeners. No sort ofs, no maybe just, no this is probably nothing but. Most of what gets cut out was never about protecting the other person. It was about protecting you from the discomfort of saying it plainly. Second, practice the one sentence test. After you give someone feedback or an assignment, ask yourself if you could summarize what you just said in one single clear sentence. If you can't do that, you probably buried the actual point somewhere in the middle of a longer, softer version of it. Go back and lead with that sentence instead. Third, practice giving very specific examples of what went well and what didn't. When there's a difference between what someone did and what you actually needed, say that gap directly. This is close, but here's specifically what is missing. Instead of some vague praise followed by a small aside about what to fix. And then the fourth way to practice this is giving direction like it's a habit, not a one-off. As a leader, you're handing off assignments constantly, and every one of them is a chance to practice this. Fair warning though, this is going to take a lot of practice before it feels natural. I've actually used this framework in another video about delegation, but of course it applies here just as much. There are 5 things that you need to communicate really clearly when you give direction. Like I said, I have a whole video about this, so I'm going to run through these really quickly. 1, what good looks like. The actual outcome described plainly. Don't assume they already know because most of the time they don't. Number 2, guardrails. What they can decide on their own and what needs to come back to you first. Number 3, what not to do. Any pitfalls you've already seen coming or what failure would actually look like so that they're not finding out those things the hard way. Number 4, what resources they have. People, tools, information they might not even know they have access to. And then the last one is when you need it done. Give them an actual date and make it clear that success depends just as much on the when as it does on the what. That's a lot to remember at first, and it'll feel like a checklist before it feels natural, and that's fine. But run through it anyway, every time until it stops being a checklist and starts being how you just give direction without even thinking about it. None of these are things that you get right by watching just one video. Owning it before your team has to, letting go of control, listening more than you talk, and being clear that it's almost blunt. These are all skills that you build one practiced moment at a time and not overnight and not by accident. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end, and I sincerely hope this helps you. If it did, please leave a like or subscribe for more honest leadership series content just like this. Goodbye for now, and I really hope to see you in the next one.